African slaves were traded for European goods such as guns and cloth that the merchant ships brought.
Trade during this time was between Europe, Africa, and the Americas.
This was called the Triangular Trade.
Trade expanded all the way to Southwest Asia.
The Atlantic slave trade occurred between the 1500s and the 1900s. The very first Spanish ship of African slaves came to America in 1518.
25% of slaves died on the ships from Africa. The voyage from Africa usually took over 7 weeks. Another reason for the high death rates amongst these ships were because slaves tried to commit suicide by not eating or by jumping overboard.
Most of the slaves died because of spreading disease. During the voyage, men were placed near the bow and women near the stern. Men were chained together and had to lie down close to one another, while women were left unchained.
275,000 slaves were exported in the 1500s. Over 1 million slaves were exported in the 1600s, and about 6 million were exported in the 1700s.
These export rates were so high because there were higher death rates for newly arriving slaves. They often died from disease on the journey to the Americas. It is thought that from 1500 to 1800, over 10 million enslaved people were brought to the Americas. Throughout the whole slave trade, 25 to 30 million slaves were deported from their homes. During the 1490s, the discovery of the Americas and of sugarcane changed slave trade.
Sugarcane was first introduced during the Middle Age Crusades from Southwest Asia. After the introduction of sugarcane to plantations, slave trade rapidly increased. Slave owners did not often encourage their slaves to have children because it was easier and cheaper to buy grown slaves than to raise them from birth. People who grew up in the Americas had a lower death rate than those who were not born there.
Many of the slaves were originally prisoners of war and used as domestic servants.
Throughout the time of the Atlantic slave trade, there were also slaves being exported across the Sahara Desert, the Red Sea, and the Indian Ocean.
With these other exports, over 10 million slaves were sent to North Africa, Arabia, Yemen, Iraq, Iran, and India. The slave trade led to depopulation of land, along with rates of human sacrifice increased.
Warfare and increased raids in war were due to the slave trade. Throughout the Great Slave Trade, most slaves lost their faith in God and heart deterioration.
During the 18th century, slave exports increased about 36,000 a year. Slave exports increased almost 80,000 per year during the 1780s.
Between 1740 and 1810, which were the peak years of the slave trade, 60,000 African captives were supplied a year, which in the end outnumbered the Europeans migrating to the New World. The end. Thanks for watching.
Created using Powtoon.